Monday, 7:30 a.m. The little kitchen breathed empty. A cold coffee ring stained the table. An official envelope sat on its edge like a wedge. My wife died 2 months ago. At the will reading, her parents demanded my inheritance. Our daughter's money belongs to her brothers. The attorney just smiled and reached for the second envelope. I pressed my thumb along the envelope's ridge until I felt it, the raised probate seal, a clean circle stamped by the county. The smell of hospital antiseptic still clung to the paper from the packet the funeral home handed me. I squared the stack of forms to the table's corner and checked the line that named the executor. Fonts tell on people. Dates do too. Paper holds its shape when voices don't. By noon the seal would speak. Lily Reed, my daughter, came in quiet, both hands around a mug. The squeak from the old chair by the window drew one long line across the room. She put the mug down beside my phone and nodded at the envelope. I slid a business card inside with a page of questions, then rested my palm on the circle stamp. Texture matters when everything else leans. One signature would erase me. Waiting was my weapon. I pulled insurance summaries, beneficiary designations, the bank letter, and a small ledger of payments Laura had kept. Each folder touched the next with a dry, firm edge. My phone flashed. Hale Family Group, reading today 3 p.m. I darkened the screen and placed it face down. Order gave me inches. Inches were enough. Victor Hale, my father-in-law, called first. He said, "Sign, then go. Keep it small." Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, breathed into the line. She said, "Everyone understands, Michael. Don't embarrass us." I ended the call and lined the pages again. The antiseptic scent thinned and gave way to ordinary coffee bitterness. I didn't argue. I counted seconds. By Wednesday the ledger would answer. A knock at the door came careful, like a funeral director's whisper. Ms. Bennett, the probate clerk, stood on the mat with a thin gray glove and a packet. Her badge caught the hallway light. She stayed on the threshold and held out the envelope, eyes on my signature line. Ms. Bennett, the probate clerk, touched the packet once. She said, "Notices for today. Judge McBride's calendar is tight." I took the pen, uncapped it, and let my hand hover as if I'd sign. Then I set the pen down. I replied, "Grief isn't consent." She nodded, eyes flicking to the raised seal under my palm. Behind her the door closer gave a measured shhh as it pulled the frame shut. Every word was a trap. Silence wins more inches. I carried the packet to the Ford and set it on the passenger seat like a witness. The seal's little ridges pressed against my skin, court name, case number, date. Inside were the setting notice and a blank waiver/renunciation. I didn't tear anything open. I let the paper cool. At the funeral office, the squeaky chair sang again, shorter this time. The director glanced from Lily to me, then to the condolence book on a small table. My fingers twitched toward the lines, square the print, straighten the pens, but I stopped. 1 inch of distance. 1 inch is policy. Victor Hale, my father-in-law, braced his hand on the table. He said, "Sign, then go. It's simple." Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, slid a stack of tissues closer. She said, "Our daughter's money belongs to her brothers." Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, raised her phone. She said, "Still stalling. Always weaker." Allison Chin, my probate attorney, closed her binder. She said, "We'll finish when it's clear." One stroke, and our house was gone. I let the seconds cut them. I set my palm back on the envelope. The paper's grain pushed back, firm and dry. I nudged the packet deeper onto the table so no one could read the edge. Allison inhaled and measured the room without moving. Somewhere beyond the wall, a stapler snapped and died in the silence. By Friday the key would move. I sat a little off to the side, nearer the wall. Lily put her hand on my forearm, a steady pressure that matched my breath. We didn't fill the space with words. I checked birth dates, policy numbers, and the telltale kerning that never matches between a scanned codicil and the real thing. Victor Hale, My father-in-law leaned farther in. He said, "Sign, then go." "Standard form," I replied. "I don't sign fraud." Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, wiped the rim of her paper cup. She said, "Shameful." Allison Chin, my attorney, turned a page. She said, "Not required. Not my hurry. Not my loss." Silence stayed and earned another inch. A scene from before arrived, clean and brief. Laura pressing a county envelope under a refrigerator magnet with a tiny brass seal. We joked that the brown thing would outlive our paint. Her fingers always loved square corners. That night we listed beneficiaries, and she asked for a separate line for Lily, in case anyone decides to be louder than the law. I lifted my eyes. The picture frame over the counter caught a flash from the lamp. The lamp flickered once, daylight's own mechanical signal. The funeral director coughed softly and glanced toward the pen by my elbow. I set the pen down and slid my chair back another inch. Victor's face tightened like cardboard dampened at the edges. Allison Chin, my attorney, let her voice carry just enough. She said, "Today is receipt and notices only. Any waiver after ledger review." Deputy Rees, the bailiff outside the probate courtroom, appeared in the doorway. He said, "Proceed as scheduled." Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, tilted her head. She said, "They'll film your surrender." I replied, "Routine ends with me." From the copy room down the hall, a printer hummed and then cut off. First contrast landed sharp. Lily didn't look away. I placed her fingers on the folder's edge so the warmth in her palm could steal the tremor in mine. We didn't rush. We held. Every word was a trap. Waiting was my weapon. Ms. Bennett slid the receipt toward me. Ink waited. I put down initials, not consent, and watched her add a note to the docket. The smell on the paper shifted, less antiseptic now, more dry cardboard and old glue. The room's chair spared us one last squeak and fell quiet. The attorney just smiled and reached for the second envelope. Allison Chin, my attorney, placed a slim envelope marked Addendum by her binder. She said, "Later today." Victor Hale set his fingertips flat on the laminate. He said, "Keep it small." I replied, "When it's clear." The stapler popped again, shorter than before. Mess. Bennett drew a crisp line in her log, and the pen rolled a tiny shadow across the page. Lily's breath evened out in an audible, careful measure. I squared the edges of the documents and listened as the refrigerator relay clicked once and stilled. The stamp clicked and ended the room. No one spoke. They brought grief today. I brought order instead. Probate desk waits at 10. Monday, 3 p.m. The conference room ran cool and bright. A glass table waited with a single folder centered. 2 chairs faced 3. By morning, the waiver would turn toxic. Allison Chin, my probate attorney, opened the binder. She said, "We start with notice." Ms. Bennett, the probate clerk, checked the case number. She said, "Executor and waiver present." Victor Hale, my late wife's father, leaned in. He said, "Sign, then go." The smell of hot toner hung faintly above the glass. I slid the folder 2 inches, aligning its edge with the table's seam. The title burned simple, Executor, Waiver/Renunciation. On the cover, a raised probate seal pressed a ring I could feel with my thumb. Paper tells the parts people try to skip. Every word was a trap. Waiting was my weapon. Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, smoothed a napkin flat. She said, "Keep it small." Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, lifted her phone. She said, "Still stalling. Always weaker." Allison Chin, my attorney, set one pen sideways. She said, "We'll finish when it's clear." I took the pen and let it hover over the waiver line. The tip couldn't find purchase because I hadn't decided it would. I looked at the kerning in renunciation, where copied letters never space evenly. Fonts betray speed. Dates betray desire. Hands betray more. One signature would erase me. Not my hurry. Not my loss. The door closer behind us breathed a long, controlled shhh. First contrast cut the room. Deputy Rees, the court bailiff, stepped in the doorway and occupied silence without speaking. Ms. Bennet glanced at the clock, then back to the seal under my thumb. Her logbook stayed open, lines patient and exact. The addendum waited behind glass. Allison Chin, my attorney, tapped the folder's top corner. She said, "Executor letter is separate authority." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, slid a business card forward. He said, "Her brothers will handle funds." I replied, "Grief isn't consent." A 7-Eleven coffee cup sat near the window, abandoned and cooling, ringed to a coaster. I pushed the waiver packet an inch away to keep its edge dry. Texture answered through my skin. The raised seal's ridge, crisp and certain, outlasted argument. In my work I'd learned a thing: paper wins if you let it. He said, "Sign, then go." I replied, "I don't sign fraud." Allison Chin, my attorney, turned a page slow. She said, "This is notice only." Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, adjusted a string of keys. She said, "Our daughter's money belongs to her brothers." Ms. Bennet, the clerk, looked to the log. She said, "Initial here for receipt." I initialed receipt, not renunciation, and watched the clerk write the time. The printer in the adjacent room woke, hummed, and stopped mid-line. Second contrast landed and left us sharper. Ruiz shifted his weight once and settled. Marissa's camera lens shivered above her phone, hungry for a fold that never came. Every word erased retirement years. I let the seconds cut them. A small memory stayed inside the room and did its work. Laura once pressed a manila envelope against our refrigerator, pinning it under a round brass magnet with a county crest. We laughed about the seal outliving the paint. That night we listed beneficiaries, accounts outside any will, and she told me to keep the ledger boring, so no one confuses noise for law. She wrote Lily's name twice, then underlined dates because dates hold. Allison Chin, my attorney, lifted another document by its clipped corner. She said, "Executor letter, draft, issued upon order." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, slid closer. He said, "Sign, then go." Standard form. I set the pen down and aligned it with the paper's edge. I replied, "Routine ends with me." Paper hides the hand. Silence wins more inches. Ms. Bennet made a gentle note by our case number. The texture of the raised seal answered again as I turned the waiver half an inch. The coil of the binding didn't snag, which meant the copy came from a clean feeder, not a flatbed. That mattered. Sloppy scans hide edits. Clean ones show them. Deputy Rees, the bailiff, touched his radio once. He said, "Maintain order." Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, raised her chin. She said, "He's afraid of ink." Lily Reed, my daughter, steadied her breath by my shoulder. She said, "We wait for the right line." If I signed here, her work vanished. Allison slid a thin plastic page protector across to me. Inside it, a single sheet lay face down. The back carried a faint shadow where a round seal had pressed through. My pulse didn't climb. I squared my chair and checked the room's reflections in the glass table to count eyes. Witnesses matter when people shape stories. Allison Chin, my attorney, watched my hand still. She said, "Receipt now, reading later." Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, curled the napkin's edge. She said, "Shameful." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, tapped the table twice. He said, "You stall again." I took the pen again, false surrender, and set its point at the renunciation line. My shoulder lowered. My wrist committed. Ink touched nothing. I capped the pen and set it parallel to the folder. I replied, "When it's clear." By Thursday, pressure would turn backward. Ms. Bennet slid a slim brass stamp across the table. The brass was cold, edges knurled for grip. She stamped the receipt box, not the waiver, then dated and initialed the margin. Her calm hit harder than any raised voice. Ruiz remained in the doorway, quiet as policy. He didn't need to be loud. Every bend of air carried toner. The seal under my thumb stayed certain. Allison Chen, my attorney, turned to Victor plainly. She said, "Executor authority follows the court's order." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, drew a breath through his teeth. He said, "Her family decides." I replied, "The record decides." Ms. Bennett's pen scratched twice, then rested. The scratching didn't count as sound in my mind, it counted as proof. I slid a copy request form from my pad and wrote today's date, aligning the numerals over the printed boxes. The glass table returned our small motions without echo. We weren't many, but we were enough to remember. The door closer released again, SHHH, and sealed the room. No one spoke for 3 seconds. Allison turned the page protector and let the face show. On the sheet, another raised circle dimpled the fibers, addendum, beneficiary clarification. Laura's name sat above Lily's in clean, stubborn type. The date was last year, 3 weeks after her final hospital admission. The notary block was legible, embossed, and matched the clerk's ledger style. Allison Chen, my attorney, placed a fingertip by the seal. She said, "Filed copy certified on call." Ms. Bennett, the clerk, touched the log page. She said, "Addendum on file." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, shook his head once. He said, "We can test later." One stroke, and our house was gone. Not today, and not here. I set the waiver back on the glass, top side up. The ridges of the probate seal touched each line of my fingers in turn. I drew a small box in my notebook labeled "Renunciation" and left it empty. The empty box calmed the room for me. Blanks can be power if you let them breathe. Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, lowered her phone. She said, "They'll call you stubborn." I replied, "They can call the clerk." Lily Reed, my daughter, straightened the cup's sleeve. She said, "We hold the line." Every minute found its mark. Every second earned an inch. Allison stacked our copies, then squared the corners tight. She used the pen cap to nudge edges level, the way accountants do when they respect time. She slid the waiver to the far side of the table, careful to leave it reachable yet remote. Victor followed the paper with his eyes, not his hand. Deputy Rees, the bailiff, rebalanced in the doorway. He said, "Clear corridor after." Ms. Bennett, the clerk, closed her log. She said, "Receipt acknowledged, waiver pending." Allison Chen, my attorney, capped the pen. She said, "Reading resumes tomorrow." Friday would measure every breath. I rose as if to take the waiver with me. I let my fingers touch its corner, then left it exactly where it lay. False resolution broke on purpose. I turned instead to the receipt, checked each initial, and passed Lily my notebook. She opened it and saw the empty renunciation box. She understood without questions. The brass stamp kissed the margin. Silence gathered and held. They pushed the waiver. The record pushed back. Tomorrow, the ledger opens. Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. My dining table held 4 bankers' boxes. A yellow legal pad waited beside a cheap stapler. The morning light laid squares across the wood like quiet tape. By Wednesday, the bank would matter. Michael Reed. I sorted insurance folders by logo and date. I lined envelopes so the return addresses formed a straight, readable column. The smell of lemon cleaner stayed mild on the tabletop. The fridge compressor clicked on from the kitchen and settled into a steady hum. The ridge of a raised probate seal pressed clean against my thumb. Waiting was my weapon. Paper hides the hand. Allison Chen, my probate attorney, called in on speaker. She said, "We start with beneficiary designations." Lily Reed, my daughter, set a second pen down. She said, "I'll label tabs." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, sent a text. He wrote, "Signed today. Keep it small." I opened Box A, Policies and Retirement, and stacked life insurance first. Each page got a sticky tab for owner, insured, and beneficiary. I circled only what counted. Primary, Lily Reed, contingent, estate. The old packet Victor loved used different language that never controlled these accounts. He wanted noise. I kept record. One signature would erase me. Not my hurry. Not my loss. Allison Chen, my attorney, waded through our stapler's touch. She said, 401k designations override any will. Lily Reed, my daughter, wrote today's date on the tabs. She said, blue for living. I replied, green for filed copies. The second box held bank letters and a thin codicil copy someone pushed years ago. I didn't trust the copy. I trusted the seal. The embossed circle on the clerk's certified addendum matched the courthouse style precisely. My thumb found its ridge without looking. Texture tells truth when light lies. Every word was a trap. Silence wins more inches. Mr. Keene, the bank estate services manager, answered on the second ring. He said, this is Keene, estate desk. I introduced myself with the account tail numbers. I said, we're confirming POD and TOD. Mr. Keene, estate services, kept it level. He said, designations on file control distribution. We read them together, line by line, without adjectives. Payable on death to Lily. Transfer on death for the brokerage. Lily again. No gaps, no blanks, no brother-in-law detours. I sketched a small grid on my pad, account, form, date, beneficiary. Each cell filled like a floor plan of order. The fridge kept humming. The lemon cleaner's scent stayed modest, not sweet. Not my hand. Not my choice. Not my future. Allison Chen, my attorney, cut in. She said, we'll file your affidavit of delivery. Mr. Keene, estate services, confirmed scheduling. He said, Wednesday, 9 o'clock, we print confirmations. I replied, we bring certified copies. A short scene rose and left no tremor. Years back, Laura brought home a brass notary-style embosser she used at school award nights. She tested it on scrap cardstock, laughed at the neat circle, and said good paper forgives pressure. Later, when our daughter won a small scholarship, Laura pressed the trophy program with that seal. She held the embossed edge to the light, and called it work you can feel. Thursday would turn their math wrong. I laid out Victor's, will copy, beside our certified addendum. Fonts spoke first, spacing spoke louder. His copy pushed a cramped serif that the probate clerk would never choose. Our addendum ran clean municipal type, the same as license forms and court letters. Dates told the rest. His page leaned into a year that never fit her last hospitalization. The seal under my thumb stood taller than his whole argument. Allison Chen, my attorney, asked me to read the notary block. She said, name, commission number, and expiration. I answered each line without pausing. I said, matches the clerk's ledger. Lily Reed, my daughter, glanced at the window. She said, he's parked outside. The curb reflected a familiar Ford pickup. Victor didn't step out. He waited and texted again, the words arriving as if juried. Shameful. Still stalling. I set the phone face down beneath box C, letters and household bills. I would answer with punctual filings, not heat. Men my age know timed order beats loud seconds. I let the seconds cut them. Every minute found its mark. Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, called without hello. She said, sign and we leave. I kept my voice flat and slow. I said, when it's clear. Marissa exhaled into the mic like a stage draft. She said, still weaker. I ended the call and wrote her line into the margin next to waiver pressure. The note would outlast her tone. Lily set a neat pile of empty sheet protectors near my elbow. Her hands didn't shake. She dealt in quiet inches the way Laura taught her, moving work forward without asking permission from noise. One stroke, and our house was gone. Not today, and not here. Box D held letters Laura had filed under humorless headings. Health insurance, finally OB. College, tuition receipts. Family, sat as its own tab, and inside it rested a handwritten page with a pasted sticker of the courthouse crest. Laura had pressed the page under a cheap fridge magnet once. The crease still showed faintly where the magnet pinched. Her sentences were short, stubborn, and free of decoration. She named Lily first in every line that mattered. Allison Chen, my attorney, listened quietly to paper moving. She said, "We'll scan and certify tomorrow." Mr. Keene, Estate Services, added morning logistics. He said, "Bring photo ID and death certificate copies." I replied, "I'll bring both sets." I stopped to straighten the whole table. Each stack received a header slip, and each header got a color. Blue kept trust accounts. Green marked non-probate transfers. White held certified court documents. The raised probate seal on the addendum faced up now, catching Lion's shadow from the window frame. I touched its ridge exactly once to anchor the feeling. By Friday, the judge would listen. Victor texted a new angle. "Executor letter mine." Then a second. "Brothers handle funds." He kept the plural close to his throat. He leaned on ours, the way men lean on borrowed trucks. I copied his words into the pad and circled. "Mine." The circle floated there like a foolish buoy. The law would sink it without ceremony. Every word erased retirement years. The record decides, not family. Allison Chin, my attorney, cleared her throat just once. She said, "We'll need your acknowledgement of receipt." Lily Reed, my daughter, slid the form forward. She said, "Initial where the arrow points." I initialed in calm square letters, ink refusing to wander. I did not touch any box labeled waiver or renunciation. Those stayed blank on purpose, a field of refusal you could see without sound. I reached for my old desk date stamp, the cheap self-inking kind accountants buy in bulk. It had lived in my drawer for a decade, used for audits and returns. I turned the wheel to today and felt the rubber click into place. I set the stamp over a copy request sheet and stared at the white margin until it accepted the shape of the day. Not my hurry. Not my loss. I almost signed Victor's receipt page where the line invited surrender. I turned my wrist, measured the distance, and let my hand fall to rest. False resolution died on the wood without emotion. Lily watched the stillness and lowered her chin, exactly the way Laura did when she finished an argument by saying nothing else. The fridge compressor paused, silence, and resumed with a click. The room returned to its plain hum. The lemon cleaner remained faint and clean, never emotional. The raised probate seal under my thumb steadied its small mountain. 3 details were enough. More would be decoration. Allison Chen, my attorney, took one last confirmation. She said, "Tomorrow, bank desk at 9. Mr. Keene, Estate Services, agreed without drama. He said, "We'll print and certify designations." I replied, "We'll bring the addendum." Marissa texted a final reach for the day. "Cameras ready for signing." I wrote, "Cameras," next to her earlier, "weaker," and drew a line between them. Some people collect moods. I collect paper. It never forgets, and it never needs permission to remain true. I let the table breathe a count of 4. Then I brought the stamp down, one firm, centered strike. The self-inking pad met the page with a soft, final thud. Ink settled into the margin like a small verdict. Silence gathered and held after the sound. They loved the signature. The ledger disagreed. Bank desk waits at 9. Wednesday, 9:20 a.m. A glass service desk cut the lobby in half. 2 tellers watched the hallway, and a third kept her pen ready. The bank sign-in sheet pointed at a blank line, urgent without words. By noon, something would break. Michael Reed. I set the folder square on the Wells Fargo desk. I aligned the tabs so each label read left to right without tilt. The lobby smelled like dry carpet cleaner on a new schedule. A low hush from the ceiling vent sat over our voices, even and cold. The ridge of an embossed probate seal pressed rough and certain under my thumb. Waiting was my weapon. Every word was a trap. Mr. Keene, the bank estate services manager, opened the meeting room door. He said, "Estate desk is open now." Allison Chin, my probate attorney, held the binder steady. She said, "We'll start with beneficiary confirmations." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, hovered by the glass. He said, Sign, then go. I walked in behind Keen and set my folder near the scanner. Allison stacked certified copies on the left, originals on the right. Lily took a chair at the wall, phone off, eyes forward. The vent carried its soft hush across a neat table. The seal under my thumb felt like grit in clean paint. Not my hurry. Not my loss. Mr. Keen, Estate Services, check the case number on the death certificate, he said. We'll verify against our internal forms. Allison Chen, my attorney, kept her voice even. She said, please note the current addendum. Victor Hale, father-in-law, edged closer to the threshold. He said, Old Will controls funds. Silence held 3 beats in the small room. The vent's hush returned like measured weather. Keen placed the first account page on the glass and closed the lid exactly once. I let the seconds cut them. A shadow slid across the frosted panel in the door. Evelyn stood behind Victor without entering. The glass kept her outline thin and long. Marissa's phone rose in the hallway, lens aimed at the stripe of our table. Their presence made the room feel shorter and harder, but the paper didn't care. Mr. Keen, Estate Services, kept to the grid. He said, Life policy, primary, Lily Reed. Allison Chen, my attorney, tapped the certification stamp. She said, Certified correct by the clerk. Victor Hale, father-in-law, tapped the door with a knuckle. He said, Standard form says otherwise. I lined Victor's copy beside the bank's form. His version leaned in with tight serif letters and a date that missed Laura's last hospitalization by months. The bank form used clean municipal type and a recorded timestamp. Fonts talk when people shout. Dates finish the sentence. Paper hides the hand. Silence wins more inches. Mr. Keen, Estate Services, turned to the brokerage transfer on death form. He said, TOD lists Lily again. Allison Chen, my attorney, did not look at the hall. She said, These stay outside probate mass. Victor Hale, father-in-law, breathed into the seam of the door. He said, Shameful. The scanner lid lifted, Keen centered Victor's. Will copy. And lowered the glass. He selected Scan to PDF. And reached for the button. The room held completely still for a count. The scanner chirped and stalled. The light bar started, caught the raised probate seal on our certified page beneath, and stopped mid-track. One thin beep held the air like a nail in wood. Keen looked down at the screen, then up at me without hurry. By afternoon, the copy would matter. Mr. Keen, Estate Services, examined the jam notice. He said, Seal emboss interfered with sensors. Allison Chen, my attorney, slid our certified page aside. She said, We can scan a flat copy. Victor Hale, father-in-law, seized the pause like a lifeline. He said, Old Will stands. Sign the waiver. I replied, Grief isn't consent. Lily Reed, my daughter, kept her voice simple. She said, We'll finish when it's clear. Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, spoke through the door seam. She said, Money belongs to her brothers. The bank room fell silent again, as if the vent waited with us. Keen removed the page, smoothed the edges flat, and placed a spacer sheet to avoid the emboss. He closed the lid with careful fingers, not touching more than needed. The seal's ridge made a small map under my thumb, a hill against their quick stories. I remembered a short scene of calm. Years ago, Laura and I opened Lily's first savings account. The banker pressed a round seal on the new passbook page, then held it to the light. Laura checked the edge with 2 fingers and told Lily to feel the truth in paper. Later, Laura kept the passbook inside a heavy folder, saying pressure protects work that matters. By 3, the hallway would thin. Mr. Keen, Estate Services, read the screen note aloud. He said, Scan complete, TOD confirmed. Allison Chen, my attorney, marked the checklist column. She said, Attach confirmations to affidavit. Victor Hale, father-in-law, found a new push. He said, Executor letter is mine. I moved Victor's executor letter. Copy beside the bank's policy page. His letter used a notary block with a commission number 2 years past its expiration. The font for the name floated a half-point off baseline, like a tire a breath low. The bank page sat square and dull as a sidewalk. Dull Winds Court. One signature would erase me. Not today, not this desk. Marissa Hale, sister-in-law, lowered her phone for a beat. She said, "Sign, then go." Allison Chin, my attorney, took the waiver from her bag. She said, "You're not required." Marissa Hale, sister-in-law, raised her phone again. She said, "Still stalling." I took the waiver with 2 fingers and held it over the folder. The paper felt smooth and thin, like a hotel menu that forgot your name. I set the pen down within reach, angled toward the signature line. The hallway quieted to a patient hush. My hand hovered, steady and unhurried. I replied, "I don't sign fraud." Mr. Keene, Estate Services, turned the monitor so Victor could read. He said, "Designations control. Waiver is voluntary." Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, shifted outside the door. She said, "Keep it small." Lily Reed, my daughter, didn't lift her eyes. She said, "We follow the record." The vent's hush returned like a slow tide across tile. No one moved for 4 seconds, then Keene printed the confirmation sheets. Paper slid into the tray with ordinary indifference. Ordinary as a blade when people expect thunder. Allison tapped each printout into a neat stack, edges aligned, corners squared. By Friday, the seal would speak. Mr. Keene, Estate Services, pointed to the certification footer. He said, "Document ID and timestamp here." Allison Chin, my attorney, placed our addendum on top. She said, "Clerk's emboss, probate seal present." Victor Hale, father-in-law, took a backward step at last. He said, "We'll contest everything." I placed my palm flat on the folder and pressed lightly, once. The embossed ridge under my thumb told me where the hill began and where it ended. Texture holds truth when mouths flood rooms. I turned the waiver back toward Allison without a mark. Silence settled for a breath, then the vent kept its low hush. The bank witness at the copier glanced over and looked away again. Work continued, and our stack grew heavier with dull, recorded facts. Dull, recorded facts outlive phone lenses. Every word was a trap. Silence wins more inches. Mr. Keene, Estate Services, slid a manila packet across the desk. He said, "Estate Services packet, embossed and logged." Allison Chin, my attorney, nodded once. She said, "We'll file this with the court." I replied, "We keep copies for Lily." I reached for the pen one more time, held it above the waiver, and drew a single, flat breath. Then I put the pen down on my side of the table, cap on, angle neat. False agreement died without a sound. The seal under my thumb felt like a small wheel locking in place. The room held still, then the scanner gave one soft completion beep. Keene gathered the printed confirmations and set them on our stack. No applause. No voices. Just the measured end of a task. They pushed the waiver. The record pushed back. Probate desk waits at 10. Thursday, 11:15 a.m. A glass conference table split the room like a stage. 2 chairs faced me while 3 more sat behind, ready for witnesses. The waiver lay centered under a clipped note that read, "Sign, then go." By noon, motions would surface. Michael Reed. I squared Allison's binder beside the county summary register. I aligned the tabs so titles lined perfectly along the margin marks. The room carried a faint lemon cleaner smell from the custodial cart. A single elevator bell chimed somewhere past the gray entry mats. The linen cover of the register dragged slightly against my fingertips, dry and stiff. Waiting was my weapon. Every word was a trap. Allison Chin, my probate attorney, opened the binder on a flagged page. She said, "Asset schedule, with updated designations." Ms. Bennett, the probate clerk, rolled in a cart. She said, "Register requires current case numbers." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, leaned on his cane. He said, "Old will controls distribution." I set Laura's insurance certifications in a clean stack by account. Fonts matched the bank's sample forms. Dates hugged the margins like rails on concrete. Their copy used slanting serif letters and a case number missing one digit. Case numbers don't forget digits. People do. Paper hides the hand. Silence wins more inches. Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, stood behind Victor without sitting. She said, "Keep it small." Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, hovered with her phone lowered. She said, "Standard form favors family." Allison Chin, my attorney, pointed to the ledger column. She said, "Pod and TOD sit outside probate." I slid the register toward Ms. Bennett. The embossed probate seal on its cover pressed a shallow ring, raised and formal. She traced it once, then flipped to the summary index. A shadow passed under the door from someone pausing in the hallway. The elevator bell chimed again, thin and exact. By afternoon, their copy would unravel. Allison Chin, my attorney, laid 3 exhibits across the glass. She said, "Policy, retirement, and brokerage confirmations." Victor Hale, father-in-law, moved his cane nearer the chair. He said, "Executor letter supersedes that." Ms. Bennett, probate clerk, examined the headings without comment. She said, "File numbers first." I placed Victor's executor letter beside the county docket printout. His letter's notary block used a commission date already expired 2 summers ago. The docket number on his letter ended with 17B, but the clerk's system had 117B. Small gaps swallow large plans. He rested his cane against the table edge as if weight could change ink. One signature would erase me. Not my hurry. Not my loss. Deputy Ruiz, the court bailiff, stepped into the doorway and waited. He said, "Quiet room, folks." Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, pulled a tissue from her sleeve. She said, "Still stalling." Lily Reed, my daughter, took the chair behind me. She said, "We'll finish when it's clear." Ms. Bennett lifted the register and checked the cases listed on the inside flap. The linen cover whispered against the glass as she turned it. She placed a yellow flag where the asset summary should be appended. Her pen hovered, then paused in midair for 3 slow heartbeats. By sunset, timing would matter. Allison Chin, my attorney, moved a fresh sheet into place. She said, "Affidavit of non-probate transfers." Victor Hale, father-in-law, tapped the glass with a knuckle. He said, "Sign the renunciation." I replied, "Routine ends with me." The fluorescent fixture above our heads blinked once and steadied. The lamp flickered, then held, like a metronome that changed its mind. No one commented. The pause was enough. Ms. Bennett resumed writing with the small pressure of someone who files storms, not fights. I remembered a short, plain errand with Laura. 3 years back, she asked me to read her policy riders at the kitchen table. She pressed our family files cover against my hand and told me to feel the cloth grain. "Paper outlives noise," she said, placing a sticky tab by Lily's beneficiary line. She closed the folder and set a heavy book on top, letting pressure make the point. Every word was a trap. I let the seconds cut them. Allison Chin, my attorney, pointed to the confirmation stamp. She said, "County emboss appears here." Mess. Bennett, probate clerk, compared our addendum index. She said, "Codicil references this list." Victor Hale, father-in-law, shifted his weight with impatience. He said, "Sign, then go." I took the pen by its middle and raised it halfway to the waiver. The nib hung above the line long enough to make the hallway still. Deputy Ruiz shifted his belt, then returned to quiet. I lowered the pen without touching the paper and set it on our side. Not my hand. Not my choice. Not my future. Marissa Hale, sister-in-law, finally raised her phone. She said, "Shameful." Lily Reed, my daughter, faced the clerk. She said, "We follow records." Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, fixed the tissue flat. She said, "Money belongs to her brothers." Allison slid Victor's old will copy closer to the register. Its margin notes, used a different pen weight than the signatures. The date on page 2 overlapped the printed line just a hair to the north. People lean when they hurry. Type never leans on its own. Waiting was my weapon. Silence wins more inches. Allison Chin, my attorney, placed the retirement plan letter on top. She said, "Employer confirms Michael as trustee." Victor Hale, father-in-law, tried a softer line. He said, "Keep it small, sign away." I replied, "Grief isn't consent." The elevator bell chimed again, one careful ring like a distant clock. Ms. Bennett glanced at the hallway and then at the register. She wrote the correct case number in small block letters and squared the page. Her hand paused, then pressed the page corner flat with a practiced thumb. By tomorrow, the addendum would carry weight. Mr. Keene, Bank Estate Services Manager, stepped into the doorway. He said, "Courier left confirmations downstairs." Ms. Bennett, probate clerk, nodded toward the cart. She said, "Please set them by the register." Deputy Rees, court bailiff, held the door steady. He said, "One at a time." Keene placed a sealed envelope near Allison's binder, then stepped back. Allison opened it and aligned each confirmation under its matching index tab. Fonts matched, numbers matched, and the footer carried a quiet chain of timestamps. Dull, square, undeniable. One signature would erase me. Not today, not here. Victor Hale, father-in-law, pushed the waiver across the table. He said, "Sign and we leave." Allison Chen, my attorney, didn't look at me. She said, "Not required." Victor Hale, father-in-law, searched for force and found none. He said, still stalling. I lifted the waiver with 2 fingers and measured its edges. The paper felt too slick, cheaper stock than the county forms. I returned it to the glass without a bend or crease. A corner aligned with the registration grid like a box finally meeting its shelf. Silence held the room for 4 measured seconds. The elevator bell chimed once more down the hall, thin as a pin. Mess. Bennett set the register so the embossed probate seal faced her left hand. She wrote a single line noting, "Non-probate transfers attached," and dated the entry. By evening, the record would be heavier. Allison Chin, my attorney, pulled a small pouch from her case. She said, "Clerk's emboss, please." Ms. Bennett, probate clerk, took the handheld press with calm hands. She said, "For the summary register." Victor Hale, father-in-law, swallowed like a man hearing a door click. I held my breath without drama. Ms. Bennett aligned the edge and lowered the press onto the page. The jaws closed with steady pressure, and the paper rose around the ring. No flourish. Just a clean ridge, new and definite under the linen's tooth. I pushed the pen across the table toward Victor. The pen stopped on the waiver, pointed back his way. A false agreement died there in the space between us. No one reached for it. They had an old will. We had her addendum. The addendum will speak. Friday, 8:30 a.m. The courthouse corridor narrowed around the benches and signs. A laminated waiver sat on a clipboard with a sticky arrow. The note said, "Sign then go," like a rule pinned to grief. Michael Reed. I set my 7-Eleven coffee on the sill and squared envelopes. The larger one carried the embossed probate seal, raised and heavy under my thumb. A small brass key lay beside it, knurled and cold against my palm. The corridor smelled faintly of alcohol sanitizer from the table by security. Waiting was my weapon. Every word was a trap. Deputy Rees, the court bailiff, held the doorway to the anteroom. He said, "Hearing at 10, keep it orderly." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, edged closer with a practiced frown. He said, "Sign the renunciation, do it now." Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, straightened the edge of a scarf. She said, "Keep it small." The metal detector buzzed once as a man re-entered with keys. Silence returned like a sheet pulled tight across a bed. I slid the key into a small vinyl sleeve, then aligned the envelope flaps. The paper's cotton texture scratched softly against my fingertips as I leveled the stack. By 10, the seal would matter. Allison Chin, my probate attorney, stepped from the elevator with a binder. she said. We wait inside, not out here. Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, lifted her phone halfway. She said, routine form, standard form. Deputy Rees, court bailiff, adjusted his radio without saying more. He said, no filming in the corridor. I placed the key on the envelope so the teeth faced left. The brass caught the overhead light and threw a pale line across the seal. Paper hides the hand. People hide intent. I kept the seconds, not the tone. One signature would erase me. Silence wins more inches. Victor Hale, father-in-law, tapped the clipboard's plastic edge twice. He said, sign, then go. Be reasonable. Allison Chen, my attorney, didn't lift her eyes. She said, not required. Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, exhaled through her nose, controlled. She said, still stalling. I aligned the waiver beside Allison's binder and checked the footer. The county form used a condensed sans serif with narrow numerals. Their printed copy used wider digits and an older seal graphic. Fonts told stories when voices lied. I let the font speak first. I let the seconds cut them. Not my hurry. Not my loss. Lily Reed, my daughter, came up the stairwell clutching her backpack straps. She said, they can't erase you now. Ms. Bennett, the probate clerk, moved past with a cart. She said, hearing room sets at 9:50. Allison Chin, my attorney, turned the binder to a flag tab. She said, executor letters at the top. A faint perfume drifted behind Evelyn as she shifted along the bench. It touched the corridor, then fell away, like a presence deciding to stay quiet. Marissa's phone chimed once and then silenced, the bubble of a muted notification. Rees glanced without moving his boots. By the hour, their patience would slip. Michael Reed. I lifted the sealed letter that Laura left with Allison. The probate seal sat proud, edges crisp, impression clean and certain. The cotton paper flexed but resisted, as if rules lived inside fiber. I traced the ring once and then set it under the key. Waiting was my weapon. Every word was a trap. Allison Chen, my attorney, leaned nearer to the envelope. She said, keep that visible for intake. Victor Hale, father-in-law, angled his body to shield the clipboard. He said, just the signature, then goodbye. I replied, grief isn't consent. Ms. Bennett parked her cart by the door and glanced at our stack. Her eyes landed on the raised seal and then on the small key. She made a note in pencil on her pad, short and square. Procedures eat tempers. That is why they exist. By 9, doors would open. Deputy Rees, court bailiff, placed a sign on a stand. He said, case numbers only past this point. Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, smoothed the folded tissue flat. She said, money belongs to her brothers. Lily Reed, my daughter, stood between me and the wall. She said, we'll finish when it's clear. I remembered a Tuesday at our bank when Laura spoke softly. We stood by the safe deposit counter while a clerk checked IDs. Laura pressed the same thin key into my palm and closed my fingers. If I can't argue, let the paper argue, she said, setting the envelope down. She told me to feel the grain so I would trust the weight. One signature would erase me. Paper hides the hand. Michael Reed. I stacked Allison's exhibits beneath the sealed letter. The binder's divider tab lined with the envelope seemed like track against wheel. The sanitizer smell drifted again as someone refilled the station. I held still until the air went plain. Allison Chin, my attorney, touched the board with one finger. She said, you may read, you need not sign. Victor Hale, father-in-law, forced a thin patience. He said, sign and we leave, Michael. I replied, routine ends with me. Marissa tilted her phone toward the corridor carpet for a quiet shot. Ruiz cleared his throat and pointed at the posted rule without speaking. She turned the screen down and stared at her shoe, cheeks tight. The metal detector gave a brief buzz behind us, then quit. By 9:30, the record would thicken. Ms. Bennett, probate clerk, returned with a leather folder. She said, counsel, file your intake here. Allison Chen, my attorney, handed over our cover sheet. She said, "Non-probate transfers attached." Victor Hale, father-in-law, slid the clipboard toward Ms. Bennett. He said, "Executor renunciation, ready to sign." I took the clipboard 2 inches and weighed it in my hands. The plastic felt slick compared to county stock, cheap and quick. A tiny bubble in the laminate caught the light like a flaw admitting itself. I held the pen, then set it down on Allison's binder instead. Not my hurry. Not my loss. I let the seconds cut them. Michael read. I moved the key from the sleeve to my shirt pocket. The teeth scratched the edge of a button, firm and bright against cloth. The envelope sat alone now, the seal facing outward like a badge. Lily steadied the corner with one finger so it wouldn't slide. Allison Chin, my attorney, turned a fresh page to a witness list. She said, "Deputy, please note parties present." Deputy Rees, court bailiff, wrote on a pad slowly. He said, "Names and roles recorded." Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, watched the pen with pressed lips. She said, "Shameful. Not my hand. Not my choice. Not my future." Naomi Green, the journalist, paused at the corridor's end. She said, "Public docket notes a contested item." Allison Chin, my attorney, met her with a steady look. She said, "Hearing room is closed." Naomi Green, journalist, tucked her phone away again. She said, "I'll wait for orders." The corridor fell still except for shoes and the distant elevator. I rolled the envelope once between my thumbs and felt the seal flex. It held shape but took a faint crease from pressure, a lived edge. Evidence ages in tiny ways that feel like honesty. By the minute, their story would thin. Victor Hale, father-in-law, tried a kinder tone that didn't suit him. He said, "We can avoid noise, Michael." I replied, "We avoid fraud instead." Marissa Hale, sister-in-law, shifted a bracelet and found the camera again. She said, "Standard form, just sign." I passed the clipboard back across the bench without touching the line. The pen remained on our binder like a pinned boundary. Ruiz glanced at his watch, then back to the sign, then to us. Ms. Bennett reemerged and touched the envelope's corner very lightly. By 9:50, doors would move. Michael read. I slid the sealed letter under the binder for Carrie. The probate seal rose through the clear plastic sheet like a coin beneath glass. My fingers were dry, the paper rough and certain against skin. The sanitizer smell faded as the corridor's air stilled. Waiting was my weapon. Silence wins more inches. Mess. Bennett, probate clerk, gestured toward the anteroom with her pencil. She said, "Counsel, assemble your packets now." Allison Chen, my attorney, stacked our exhibits in order. She said, "Key stays with you, not the file." Lily Reed, my daughter, looked me square in the eye. She said, "They can't erase you now." I raised the clipboard once more as if to sign before we entered. Victor's shoulders loosened, Evelyn's eyes softened for the first time. I held the pen over the line long enough to register that false comfort. Then I placed both items on the bench without a mark. Not my hurry. Not my loss. Paper hides the hand. Deputy Rees opened the anteroom door and waited with his palm out. The corridor inhaled with him as he shifted space. Naomi stepped back without pushing for angle or quote. The sign on its stand turned a slow inch from a draft. I pocketed the small brass key and lifted the sealed letter. The seal faced outward, no smudge, only that thin crease where my thumb had pressed. It looked like custody with history, not theater for noise. I nodded once to Allison and moved toward the door. The door closer breathed behind us, a soft, even shhh. The corridor went quiet enough to hear shoes stop. They pressed for control. Custody stayed with law. Hearing room opens at 10. Friday, 10 a.m. The hearing room held a long walnut table and rules. A single microphone waited between nameplates, red light dark for now. The judge's chair stood empty, high and square above the flags. Michael read. I set Allison's binder parallel to the table's grain. The embossed probate seal on our filings showed clean ridges under light. The cotton stock felt dense, almost stubborn beneath my fingertips. The room smelled faintly of lemon furniture polish from the bailiff's cloth. Today, the seal would speak. Ms. Bennett, the probate clerk, arranged 2 stacks by the microphone. She said, "Case number, parties present, counsel ready." Allison Chin, my probate attorney, raised her hand slightly. She said, "Petitioner and counsel present." Victor Hale, my father-in-law, leaned toward his folder deliberately. He said, "Respondents present, counsel arriving." The wall clock's hands slid without a tick, like time gliding. Silence pressed on the table, steady and exact. I squared the edges of our exhibits with a practiced nudge. Waiting was my weapon. Deputy Ruiz, the court bailiff, stepped forward and placed a recorder. He said, "When the judge enters, remain seated." Evelyn Hale, my mother-in-law, smoothed the corner of a tissue. She said, "Keep it small." Marissa Hale, my sister-in-law, lowered her phone inside her purse. She said, "No video, got it." The digital recorder beeped once alive, a sharp procedural chirp. The red dot blinked, then held steady like a patient eye. I felt the paper again, its grain like fine cloth. Every word was a trap. Allison Chin, my attorney, opened to the flagged codicil tab. She said, "We'll begin with her addendum." Victor Hale, father-in-law, angled his shoulders toward the microphone. He said, "Old will governs, not late edits." Allison Chin, my attorney, paused a breath longer than needed. She said, "Law respects valid intent." The judge entered without ceremony, robe flat and movement spare. Ruiz announced the case with one measured breath and step. The room went still enough to hear shoe leather flex. Silence wins more inches. Michael Reed, I placed Laura's sealed letter beside the witness list. The probate seal rose sharply, edges crisp like a small topography. The paper resisted a fold, it wanted to lie true. I left it where the light caught its ridge. By noon, names would narrow. Mess. Bennett, probate clerk, called our style of cause and date. She said, "Appearances for the record." Allison Chin, my attorney, gave our names clearly. She said, "Petitioner, Michael Reed, with counsel." Victor Hale, father-in-law, raised his chin, voice low. He said, "Respondents, Victor and Evelyn Hale, pro se." The judge glanced to the stacks with practiced economy, not haste. He kept his pen capped, a quiet signal about tempo. I matched that stillness by aligning the binder seam. Not my hurry. Not my loss. Allison Chin, my attorney, slid Exhibit A toward Ms. Bennett. She said, "Codicil executed, notarized, stored, later confirmed by counsel." Victor Hale, father-in-law, nudged a manila folder forward with 2 fingers. He said, "Old will, complete, original language preserved." The judge, steady above us, uncapped his pen. He said, "Let's address non-probate designations." Michael Reed, I laid out the account letters with beneficiary lines. Bank forms showed pay-on-death names separate from the estate's mass. The fonts matched institution stock, dates aligned with recorded updates. I watched Victor watch the numbers, then his jaw settle. One signature would erase me. Mr. Keene, Bank Estate Services Manager, took the end chair. He said, "We verified designations, last confirmed 6 months prior." Allison Chin, my attorney, turned her binder slightly toward him. She said, "Non-probate transfers bypass the will." Victor Hale, father-in-law, drew a slow breath through his nose. He said, "We contest the codicil, not the bank." Ms. Bennett added 3 sticky flags without lifting her eyes. She recorded each citation like a mason laying block. The furniture polish smell thinned, leaving the room plain. I let the seconds cut them. Michael Reed, I lifted Laura's letter without breaking the seal. The ridge pressed into my thumb, firm and definite. I set it down where the judge could see the embossing. Paper hides the hand. Allison Chin, my attorney, placed her palm on the binder's corner. She said, "We also have counsel's custody record." Ms. Bennett, probate clerk, accepted the log and clipped it. She said, Chain noted. Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, pinched her tissue into a tight square. She said, "Shameful." The judge traced the codicil's margin with his pen cap. He looked at the notary block and the ledger reference. He stopped, then moved only his eyes to Victor's folder. The room stayed quiet enough to hear fabric shift. Michael Reed, I kept the second envelope Laura left under my right hand. The cotton texture felt like a rule you could touch. I remembered a morning at our kitchen table with forms. Laura checked a line twice, then placed her ring on the seal. She said nothing, but her hand rested on the embossing. She lined the edge to the table's seam precisely. She slid the envelope toward my side without explaining. She trusted paper to outlast anger. Allison Chen, my attorney, turned to the judge deliberately. She said, "We request letters testamentary per codicil appointment." Victor Hale, father-in-law, leaned into the mic too close. He said, "Still stalling." "Always weaker," I replied. "I don't sign fraud." The recorder light blinked again as Ms. Bennett marked time. Ruiz kept his hands folded, radio quiet on his shoulder. The judge uncapped his pen a second time and wrote. Silence held like cooled glass. Michael Reed, I slid the non-probate stack back into order. The binder's spine matched the table's straight edge perfectly. I moved Laura's sealed letter a hair forward for sightline. The seal caught light in a bright bevel. Allison Chin, my attorney, returned to the codicil signature page. She said, "Witness statements accompany notary ledger references." Ms. Bennett, probate clerk, nodded once without looking up. She said, "Ledger contact attached." Victor Hale, father-in-law, lifted his folder but didn't advance it. He said, "Old Will stands without all this." The judge exhaled through his nose, slow and flat. He tapped his pen lightly once, not for effect. The room took the rhythm as permission to breathe again. Then he spoke with short clauses. The judge, measured and even, looked at each pile. He said, "Non-probate transfers are outside the estate's reach." The judge, measured and even, turned to our codicil. He said, "Properly executed and retained with counsel." The judge, measured and even, recapped his pen firmly. He said, "Letters testamentary will issue to Mr. Reed." Michael Reed, my fingers steadied on the paper's edge without lifting. The cotton texture felt like a verdict set in thread. I didn't look at Victor. I aligned the binder seam. Not my hurry. Not my loss. Naomi Green, the journalist, stood at the back with a pad. She said, "Public record will reflect the order." Deputy Ruiz, court bailiff, checked the door with one glance. He said, "Remain seated until adjourned." Marissa Hale, sister-in-law, stared into her purse silently. She said, "When it's clear." Ms. Bennett placed a blank order on a thin foam pad. She pressed the raised sealed die above the signature line carefully. The handle came down with controlled pressure, no drama. The room's stillness took that sound like a stamp on air. After this order, silence follows. Allison Chin, my attorney, slid a pen toward the judge's blotter. She said, "Order for signature, Your Honor." Victor Hale, father-in-law, widened his hands like he might object. He said, "We request a continuance." The judge, measured and even, didn't change tone. He said, "Request denied." Michael Reed, I placed Laura's sealed letter at the far right corner. The embossing in that envelope echoed the court seal in line. History met process with matching reliefs under fluorescent light. Two ridges said the same thing differently. Every word was a trap. Evelyn Hale, mother-in-law, folded her tissue into her palms slowly. She said, "We'll appeal." Allison Chin, my attorney, closed the binder 1 inch. She said, "File whatever you deem fit." Ms. Bennett, probate clerk, confirmed the clerk's copy number aloud. She said, 3 certified, 1 original." The judge signed with a steady, unfussy stroke across the order. Ms. Bennett turned the page for quick drying, no flourish. Ruiz shifted his stance and rested a hand near the door. Procedure advanced like a train on schedule. Michael Reed, I moved the original order to the center of the table. The embossed probate seal bulged cleanly from the heavy stock. I set my pen beside it, parallel to the lower rule. The lemon polish smell faintly returned as Rees opened the door. I let the seconds cut them. Allison Chin, my attorney, angled the order toward me. She said, "Take custody now." Victor Hale, father-in-law, didn't reach for his folder again. He said, "This isn't final." I replied, "The record disagrees." The recorder's light blinked once as Ms. Bennett pressed stop. The room accepted that small sound as its ending chime. Papers slid into folders with a dry, unhurried whisper. The texture of the order carried weight you could feel. Michael Reed. I placed Laura's sealed letter atop our closed binder. I slid the signed order beneath it, seal facing upward. Both embossings rose like twin landscapes under one palm. I stood only when Rees nodded. They brought grief today. I brought order instead. Deputy Rees, court bailiff, opened the door to the corridor. He said, "You can step out now." Naomi Green, journalist, stayed back from the threshold respectfully. She said, "Public copy, when available." Ms. Bennett, probate clerk, gathered the stamp and pad carefully. She said, "Certified copies at the window." I walked into the brighter hallway and set our stack on a bench. Allison watched Victor from the corner of her eye, not lingering. Lily stood already waiting, shoulders square and breast steady. She placed her hand on the top envelope and said nothing. "Michael Reed." I lifted the order for Lily to see the seal. The raised circle caught the overhead light and held it. The cotton paper resisted flexing as if guarding a border. I nodded once, small and final. They counted my silence. The seal spoke louder. "Subscribe if you want more stories about real men who don't scream. They act." Coldly? To the end? Which details stayed with you? Would you have stopped there, or gone further?